I remember the early days of Android. You had those fingerprint scanners where you actually had to swipe your finger across the scanner. You had modular parts, flip out cameras, keyboards, that Verizon Droid sound, and more. Things are crazy back then with some good and bad and a lot of execution that looks pretty rough compared to what we have now. Whether it's good or bad is not the point. The point is that it was really fun back then. My first Android was the Samsung Epic 4G with that horizontal landscape keyboard that just slid out. I enjoyed using Android phones 75% of the 12 past years, and most of the time it was using Google Pixel phones and Nexus devices. And this is where this phone comes in. It's the Apple iPhone 16 Pro Max, and hot take, I think it's the most Android-like iPhone to date. And that may be a really great thing for some people, and it might be a nightmare for others. Now, for this video, you'll need to leave behind your assumptions and the whole tribalistic camps of iOS versus Android and just take a step back. That's what I had to do, and I had a revelation that in many ways, this is more like an Android phone than a lot of Android phones nowadays. Maybe this video will help you see what I'm seeing, and maybe you'll end up giving the iPhone a shot, or if you're an iPhone user, you'll absolutely hate where things are headed. By the way, if you're wondering where I'm at, I'm in Japan for the first time, which is very exciting. So you'll see a bunch of Tokyo right now along the way. Now, before we talk about how the iPhone 16 is the most Android-like phone ever, we have to talk about how Android phones are more like an iPhone than ever before as well. The Google Pixel 9 Pro XL is a good example of that. If you held it in your hand, it feels like an iPhone with its blocky cold metal sides and rounded corners. Even Samsung's upcoming Galaxy S25 Ultra is rumored to leave behind that iconic blocky note design for rounded corners. Android used to have all these fun quirky things like the squeeze to activate the assistant on the Pixel devices. I mean, you still have some cool things that are around, like the S Pen on the Samsung Galaxy Ultra models and a thermometer on the Google Pixel devices. I don't really think a lot of people really like those, but overall, these extra things are gone. In comparison to a thermometer, you have things like LiDAR, which is really helpful. You also have an action button, which is kind of unique to have on a phone nowadays because everyone removed that. And then they have that camera control button that we'll talk about later on. And it's true, the iPhone gained USB-C not too long ago, which was long overdue, but it kind of lends itself to this whole idea that Apple may not be the first at everything, but it tends to execute a little bit better. I mean, USB-C is USB-C, so that one doesn't count, but action buttons and camera control, maybe. At least on the Pro models, you can finally transfer quickly, not so much on the normal 16 models. Another thing that the iPhone has that you don't really find on Android phones is a robust face unlock method. Other phones like the Google Pixel, it utilizes the camera and then somehow AI, but I don't really know how it's secure compared to the iPhone. The thing that's particularly unique or cool about having LiDAR on your iPhone is the fact that you can scan your environment. So that can be really great for augmented reality uses, as well as things like real estate or designing. And that's something that is really awesome that you can have on a phone. So I'm surprised that that's not there for the Google Pixel 9. There's an added benefit of sensors like that being utilized for things like car crash detection, which is something that I touched on with the engineers way back when, like during the pandemic. They mentioned that that might be something that's helpful, but they can't comment on it. And well, years later, it's still not there. Now, while we're talking a lot about how the iPhone is the most Android-like iPhone, yeah, it's still a review. So I do have to point out that the display on the 16 Pro Max is slightly bigger than on the 15 Pro Max, and that's largely from the decreased bezel size and the fact that it is actually physically a little bit bigger. It's a little bit wider and quite a bit taller in my opinion, and I can notice it. Like it kind of bothers me. I didn't really like the 15 Pro Max because of how big it is, so having maybe like a millimeter wider is not something that I prefer, but you know, we got to review the best out here at This Is Tech Today, so I bought it for you guys. Another thing about the display is that it maintains that 2000 nit peak into brightness, but it goes down to 1 nit of minimum brightness, which is really great. So that's something that's really nice to have, and it's really great in terms of saving battery life on that always on display as well. Now, that 2000 nit peak brightness is lower than what you can get on some Android phones, including the Google Pixel 9 Pro XL, which is definitely noticeably brighter right now. Now, it would be really inappropriate for me as a tech reviewer to not mention the whole 60 Hz on the base model iPhone 16 and 16 Plus models, and there's a reason for why we don't have 60 hertz, and it's not a conspiracy theory. It's not some sort of crazy thing. You have to remember, Apple will make or break entire supply chain businesses and put them out of business if they don't go with them. And they have certain standards and requirements for their displays. Well, according to Max Weinbach and Ross Young, so Ross Young is really like the guy for displays, and he has a 100% hit ratio. So essentially, if Apple were to put 120 hertz LTPO panels in all of the base models, it would take up more than the entire supply in the entire world of qualifying LTPO panels. There's simply not enough panels available for the base models. So it's really important to remember how many units Apple sells of the base models compared to the Pro models. And that's why we don't have 120 hertz on the base models. I used to be upset about it myself, but this reasoning makes total sense. So the projection is next year we'll have 120 hertz on the base model. So we'll find out if that's true. Now, unfortunately, we're not able to get a tour of the palace today, but you can kind of see there's all these walls and things that are set up here for defense. You have moats and walls and all these crazy things surrounding the area, and then another moat on top of it. And that's all for protection in the case of war. So it's kind of interesting how this is all set up and still here. Overall, the feel and hardware of the iPhone is mostly the same, so that is a little bit boring in comparison to year, but there are slight refinements. There is more of a matte finish to the railing, which I do like, and it feels a little bit better in the hand in terms of the curves. And something that's really interesting about the iPhone that I found out here in Japan is the ability to use Suica on the iPhone. So Suica is the payment processing, or like a kind of like a credit card that you can use everywhere for your train, for food, for pretty much everywhere, and you just tap and pay. And something that's really unique about the iPhone is that you can just pull up the Wall app, search for Suica or Pasmo, and then load money onto it immediately from your Apple Wallet instead of having a card sent to you. This is different than the Pixel, where that's not available on your Pixel phone unless you have a Japanese model. So in terms of this trip, I've had to lean on the iPhone over my Pixel, and that's something that's really neat about the iPhone. But isn't this cool? This is what the Tokyo train station looks like. It has tons of character to it, and it looks awesome. Now, an interesting thing about the software, I was watching the Genius Bar podcast with John Prosser and Sam, and he mentioned how he felt like iOS 18 was the most clunky, disjointed, least consistent, just kind of a mess of a OS from Apple, and he was really like kind of taken aback by that.
As we get further into Apple, the siloing of these teams and nobody communicating has made the product start to feel, and I'm noticing this in the software too, it just makes, Apple is starting to have a fragmentation problem. The company that was historically anti-fragmentation, so good at unity, is starting to become fragmented, and I think it's because they're just not locked in anymore.
The whole benefit to an iPhone from the moment of its inception to now is we make hardware and software together.
What if the reason why is because it's more like an Android phone than ever before? By the way, I'm here at Yodabashi Camera here in Japan, and it is insane. It's like a Best Buy on steroids. Just think of it like 8 times bigger. There are just like so many floors of everything. It's crazy. One of the nice things that was added to iOS 18 is RCS support, which makes it work really well with Android phones, which is long overdue. Now, if only we can get it so the Google Pixel or Android utilizes RCS in a standard way that works well with the iPhone, because the iPhone now is utilizing the standard of RCS while Google is using something different. Kind of weird. You can now move around your icons so it's not just all locked up to the top. You can move it around your screen, but it's still not like completely freeform. It'll still kind of shuffle things around for you. You can change the color of it as well, but it doesn't look all that great. So it's still not as good as Android. One of the coolest features that has come to iOS 18 that I think it might be my favorite is notification summaries. It's able to take everything that you're seeing in a text message or your app and summarize it into 2 lines. I do wish it had 3 lines because that would be a little bit more context for everything, but it's been really cool. I have a friend who's going through a pretty hard time with his daughter and going through some medical things, and it took a 3 paragraphs and summarized it into one sentence, and it was spot on. But sometimes it doesn't summarize very well. Another thing that was added was the ability to customize your notification shade. So if you want to move around your toggle settings for different things, you can totally do that. You can even resize some of them, or you can be a complete idiot like I am and add in a ton of brightness sliders.
I just love all the customization options on iOS 18 beta. You have all of these neat pages here, like this one. Like maybe I need to adjust the brightness, or maybe I need to adjust the brightness, or wait, maybe I need to adjust the brightness. Or maybe I need to adjust the brightness. That's really helpful when you wake up late at night and you're a little groggy and you're trying to find out where the brightness slider is.
This is something that has been really popular on Android phones for a long time. So having this on iOS is crazy. Now, the dynamic island is also really helpful and awesome. I know a lot of people think it's not all that cool or it's just another notification thing, but the fact that it has all these helpful summarizations or little widgets that you can interact with is really helpful, especially for things like when you're calling an Uber or traveling. It's a little bit more advanced and polished than what I've seen on Android phones. I know Samsung has had kind of like a notification little bubble thing, but it's really just like a little pill. It's not a full-on widget with the ability to interact with it. So I've really enjoyed using it on this trip over here to Japan. And then you have Apple Intelligence. It's a little bit half-baked and you can't really utilize all these awesome features. If anything, this does kind of feel like some aspects of Android, where Google has a lot of things that are in beta for a long time and sometimes forever, and it's a little bit half-baked at times, but we can definitely say that Google has definitely had more time at this and has been able to implement things that are way more useful and helpful long before Apple has. So things like call summaries and screening and the assistant being able to interact with the caller is pretty phenomenal, and one of the reasons why I love the Google Pixel version of Android the most. I forgot one thing that is really awesome about iOS. It's the calculator, and it's not the whole like math drawing thing. It's actually the fact that there's just a currency conversion built into it. Converting the Japanese yen to USD has been super helpful on this trip, and I looked through my Google Pixel and it's not there. So what's going on, Google? Get on that. Now, the camera control button is really interesting in the sense that it reminds me of a lot of the quirky fun things that used to happen on Android phones back in the day when they were just trying out things. In fact, there were Android phones that had a capture button for the camera. But I would say this is a little bit more unique than just a button. By the way, we're at the Fushimi Inari Taisha. This is a Shinto shrine. It's absolutely beautiful, and I totally butchered all that, sorry. Now, for the camera control button, it's hard to not point out where it's placed. It makes a lot of sense if you're using it in portrait mode, using your thumb in your right hand, or if you're in your left hand, you can use your ring finger. It fits really well there, but once you put it into landscape mode, it doesn't really fit pretty well. It's a little bit too far to the left for practical use, and I have to reach over here a little bit more in order to reach it. But I guess it's kind of nice if you want to do social media. I wish there was Touch ID in there. For the camera control, you can press it once to open up the camera. It even works on the lock screen if you want to do that. And if you press down again, I'll take a photo or start recording a video if you have that enabled on the video side. And if you double tap on it, just like a light double tap, it'll open up different settings. If you move between zoom, depth, exposure, a whole bunch of different options here. Some might find it redundant, but it really depends on what you're using it for. Now, when you press down on the camera control button, it does introduce a little bit of shake, but that's no different than utilizing the volume button, which makes me realize something. If you're using this in landscape mode, where's the best spot for the volume button? Right where your thumb is. So you have an option here for your thumb when you want to take a picture, but if you're in portrait mode, you use the camera control button. So I don't know if anyone's ever talked about that, but that's something that I just realized. I find that the zoom feature is okay, but changing between the different lenses is more useful to me. Usually when I'm doing camera comparisons, I accidentally swipe in between the focal ranges, so it's not like a proper native zoom range, so it's nice to have that option. But probably the most useful thing that I found is being able to change between photographic styles or the EV settings. That's something that's not as easy to get to, so having it readily available right in the camera control is super helpful. Now, one thing that's really annoying about the camera control button is that I accidentally interact with it all the time. It's It's mostly when I use it in my left hand, which is what I predominantly use it in. If you have it in your left hand, when I go to take a picture, I accidentally squeeze it. And so when I squeeze it, it either takes a picture or activates some sort of setting. So most of the time when I'm trying to take a photo, I accidentally start zooming or changing whatever setting, and that's really annoying. Now there's some customization options for the camera control. If you go into the camera settings in the settings area, you'll see this camera control button at the top. And here you can see the clean preview. I actually don't like this removing all the settings that are there, because what if I want to adjust something? Now I'm just waiting for them to reappear, so I'm going to turn that off. You can launch the camera either with a single click or a double click. So if you find yourself accidentally launching it all the time, you can go to a double click. That reminds me a little bit more of Android. I'm sure those Android users know what I'm talking about. And then you also have the option of launching a different app. So you can launch the code scanner. So this is really popular over here in Asia, where they scan a lot of QR codes. You can open up Instagram Identifier, Moments app, or none. So a lot of really great options here that are available right now. There's no Keynote on here. There's no Blackmagic Pocket or Blackmagic camera on here, but hopefully those will be added. But for now, you have the Moment app. So shout out to my Moment friends. At the moment, I do feel like camera control creates more issues than benefits, but I do think that it has the capability of being utilized for a lot more than just the camera. So it'll be interesting to see if Apple opens it up to developers to do other things. Now, something that's really funny about this trip is I ran into a few people that have the new iPhone, and I asked them what they thought about the new camera control button. So you had someone who was younger in their 20s and then someone who was pretty much retired, and all of them said that they didn't really use it. They're not too tech savvy and stuff, so they weren't sure how to really use it or what the benefit was, other than occasionally taking some pictures. So it's not exactly a huge hit. Now, as for RAM, I do wish they had more of it in the iPhone, because I keep finding that I'm running into lag all the time, especially when you are utilizing the camera a lot. You'll get a lot of things where I'll say system pressure is really high, apps are closing all the time. I'll even get stutters in the camera app when I'm taking a lot of photos, which is really something you would not expect from a phone that's supposed to be this powerful. And the heat cooling definitely, I'm sure, is helping, but it's still creating some sort of issue where I am noticing it pop up a lot when I'm running the Keynote app or recording a lot of video. So it'll say system pressure is really high, and that's a little bit concerning. I do wish we had even more robust cooling and more RAM. Now, one of the big features in the new iPhone 16 are these photographic styles, which I really like, because a lot of smartphones nowadays have this whole kind of washed out look where they raise up the shadows and lower the highlights, and everything looks flat and just like washed out and boring. So you have the option of having control of that. You have a whole bunch of different options like cool rose, neutral, rose gold, which is turning out to be my favorite, amber, standard, which is what is typically what you would see on an iPhone, and I do not like or prefer the way it looks on my skin. You have vibrant, natural, luminous. Natural is a good one. And then dramatic, which is also really cool. And then quiet, cozy, ethereal, muted, black and white, and then stark black and white. Of course, one of the benefits of everything is shooting in log. So this is log right now. Anything that has this really nice color grade like this is being shot in log using the Keynote app. If you use the native camera app, it ends up taking up a ton of storage. So it's a little bit of a downside in that regard. But yeah, I think that's what, like, log is one of the biggest benefits of having an iPhone. So as a content creator, I don't have to bring my camera around. I just bring my iPhone and I can get really good footage like this. Now, I don't know if you can see that up there, but that's Godzilla up there. You also have 4K 120 frames per second on the iPhone 16 Pro Max and Pro. It's pretty nice. It's nice to have the option of being able to slow down. You can have like movements that are really fast on your phone, and then when you slow it down, it looks a lot smoother. I like that you can adjust it in post-processing, so that's really good. But if you were to use it in log formatting, you will burn through so much data. It's not even funny, so it's not even worth using that, in my opinion, because it'll just like kill all of your storage. And then I was trying to record into an external drive, and it literally just glitched out. It like said that there's 0 storage left over, so I had to restart the phone, and then everything was there. I thought I lost everything. So I wish it was available on third-party apps, but currently it's only available on the stock camera app. There are other little quirks that are kind of really just disjointed right now. That's a little bit of a bummer. You have stabilization that's better in the native camera app. You have action mode only in the native camera app. If you want the better codec but without taking up tons of room, you have to use a third-party app like Blackmagic Camera or the Kino. If you want LUTs burn into it like what I'm doing right now, you would use Kino. It's just like all over the place. Oh, and if you want to be able to change your lenses while you're filming video, you have to use the native camera app. So I don't know what's like preventing it from being able to have all those features, but hopefully that's something that can be kind of smoothed out eventually. Now, another thing that I noticed is that the 4K 120 frames per second option only supports a 1x and a 2x focal range, so you don't have the option of ultra wide or telephoto, which would be really convenient. So I wonder what the limitations are with that, because I would totally use different focal lengths for 4K 120, especially the telephoto. One thing that's really nice is that the ultra-wide camera now has a 48 megapixel sensor, which makes it great for being able to film yourself in the ultra-wide, not having to worry about framing. Before, I would have to record on the 1x camera in order to get the best quality, and it's not as forgiving in terms of framing, so sometimes I record a whole take and find out that my top of my head is like all cut off, which is so annoying. So having this is pretty dang awesome at 48 megapixels. Now, if only they could add that to the telephoto camera, like even the Pixel has. All the Chinese phones have really insane camera specs right now with incredible sensor sizes and tons of megapixels, so you can do tons of things. And I wish we could see that on the iPhone. Now let's talk about the audio mix feature. There are 4 different options. You have the standard one like this one. We're here by this little fountain, so you can hear a lot of different things. There's the in-frame option, which should isolate to just what you see in the frame. Then you have the studio mode, which I believe sounds more like you're in a podcast. So it should isolate my voice and you shouldn't hear anything else. And then you have your cinematic mode, which is more like being able to hear more of your voice, but a little bit of your surroundings, so it still sounds natural. How do you think it sounds? Personally, I think the studio one sounds a little bit artificial, and a lot of times I would rather do something like fix it up in post in DaVinci Resolve or Isotope in order to get the sound that I want, but it's pretty neat that you can do this on your phone. It's pretty much like you have all you need to use for content creation with your iPhone, which is really cool. And what's even better is the fact that you do not have this burned into your video. You can do post-processing, you can change it later on, you can do it again multiple times if you want to, which is really awesome, and a lot of flexibility that you are seeing on iPhone that you normally wouldn't see, and I really appreciate that. Dare I say that's a little bit like the whole philosophy behind Android. Now, one thing to know, in order to use the audio mix feature, you do have to utilize the native camera app. You can't utilize third-party apps at the moment, which is a bummer, because I would much rather prefer to use Kino. Now, when we take a step back and we look at all the different things that are going on with the new iPhone, we can definitely see that there's a ton of flexibility going on here with the ability to choose what you want to do and choose it after the fact in many ways. And then you have quirky little additions to it, like the camera control button, which may or may not work very well, depending on how you view it. And I view that it has some room to go, but at least it's something that's new that's being added in terms of hardware that you don't normally see elsewhere. But like, that is kind of the fun part about Android that is missing, that has been slowly disappearing from it. So the iPhone gaining these new features and abilities is it becoming more like an Android phone. So the question is, do these changes make you more interested in getting an iPhone than ever before? You even have a lot more flexibility in terms of software. So I'd love to know what you think in the comments. So let me know. And of course, if you want to pick up the new iPhone or any of the accessories, go ahead and click the links down below in the description. I also think it's really fair to say that for most people, the normal iPhone 16 is probably the biggest jump and biggest benefit. It has a ton of really awesome improvements compared to the prior generation, while the Pro model is a little bit more iterative for sure. So for most people, that's something that you should probably go with, but I would say the Pro is probably the most pro phone out there. It's legitimately something that I would use as a content creator, and it's kind of amazing that I'm able to film so much just with my phone right now instead of this camera right here. So the price difference is making a lot of sense for me because it's a Creator Pro thing. And a lot of professionals are using iPhones at events. The LG event I went to, almost everyone was using a smartphone. So you can't say that only professionals use big cameras like this anymore because smartphones are getting pretty dang good.